Hi, Chris Murray here. We're going to be taking a look at a feature in 3ds Max called xView. xView is a tool that I like to use to double check the integrity of my geometry before I send things off to the 3D printer. You can see that I have a lot of different pieces of geometry that I'm going to send off to the printer here pretty soon. So I want to check and make sure everything is good to go, that I won't get any errors when I export them. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this object. I'm going to isolate it. There are a couple of different ways to double check the integrity of your geometry. The first one is really to use a modifier called STL. So if I hit the X key and then I just type in STL, I'll get the STL Check Modifier. Alternatively, I can also just choose it from the drop-down menu here alphabetically. It's down here. STL checks, exact same thing. And what this does is this sits on top of the geometry in the modifier stack, and then you just turn on the check button, and it shows you if there are any errors. And I'm like, okay, that's great. That's easy. It's checking for everything. It's checking for open edges, double faces, spikes, which are vertices that are kind of way out of normal of the other vertices or multiple edges. This is great, and it works, and it shows me how many errors I have to fix, and that's fine. And that's a nice thing that I use right as I'm done. But what I really like to do is use the xView tool, which is over here on the general viewport label here, the general settings, and it's right over here called xView. And what it does is it has a lot of different pieces of information that I can provide to you specifically. Whereas the STL Check Modifier is kind of generic and only has, you know, like 5 options. This has a lot more options for you to look at. So, for example, I want to look for open edges. Now, or multiple edges or open edges, either one. Multiple edges is if there's more than one edge on top of another edge, so basically overlapping edges, kind of like overlapping faces. But I want to look for open edges in this case. And what open edges tells me is that vertices are broken or unwelded. So if I turn on open edges, you can see that I get a green highlight here, and this shows me that I have some broken geometry here. If I go to my wireframe view, it might be a little easier to see there. I can see I definitely have some green pieces of geometry there. I'm going to go ahead and come over here, and I can see that this edge is green, this edge is green, this edge is green, but the surrounding edges are not. So that tells me that this vertex right here is the culprit. So I'll go over here and I'll get rid of my STL Check Modifier, and I'll go into vertex mode. And if I just do a very small selection over that vertex, I can see that I have 3 vertices selected. So indeed, that is my problem. All I have to do is just weld these vertices. There's any number of ways that you can do that. I'm going to right-click and choose Collapse, and it collapsed them all to one vertex. And I can see right here, it is now one vertex, and you'll also notice that the edges are gone. I can tell that xView is still enabled by the green information that's being shown down here in the bottom center of the viewport. It still says I have 20 open edges. So let's go ahead and find those. Now over here, this is a little bit of a bigger problem. If I go into my polygon selection mode, I can see I'm selecting these polygons, but if I go into element selection, I can see that this is actually a huge piece of geometry that's been separated off. So the same procedure applies. I would just go in and grab these vertices right here. So it says I have 2 vertices selected. If I wanted to, I could actually just grab a bunch and weld those vertices. That might even be a little bit easier to do. So I'll just choose weld, and you can see that it just immediately welded those, and those edges went green. So, or they went from green to white, which means that they are no longer selected. Now I have to be a little careful if I'm selecting these vertices. It says I have 4 vertices selected, but I have a lot of vertices in the back selected, so I do need to be a little bit careful on that cleanup. So I'll go in here. That's why I'm drawing really small selection dialogues or selection windows to grab these vertices. I want to keep the selection areas really small because I don't want to inadvertently select vertices behind it. I could also choose ignore backfacing, but that really won't help me with vertices that are facing my view but are still just behind or just out of view of the perspective here. So I've got these vertices selected. I'm just double checking to make sure I don't have anything else selected, and then I can just click on weld, And that pretty much solves all of my problems there. And I can see now down here, my information is saying I have no more open edges. If I go back over here and I just click on this text, it brings back up all of the xView commands that I want to use. Let's go ahead and take a look for overlapping faces. And it says I have 2 faces that are overlapping, and notice it shows those in green. So I can come over here and I can select these faces and just do a little more investigation and see what's going on. So probably have to double check some vertices in there and see what is going on there with this face right here. Okay, it might have to do with the proximity. So we're going to click on the configuration, and we're just going to set the tolerance down to 0 and see if the problem goes away. We'll turn this back on. And indeed it did. So that really wasn't any problem at all. It was just the fact that the tolerance was a little too far apart and those faces were just getting caught up in that. So now that I'm ready to go, I'm done with xView, I'll just go ahead and add the STL Check Modifier to it. So we'll grab that, turn that on, double check, and it says no errors. So this is now ready to be exported to the 3D printer. If you like this video and you learned a lot from it, please share it with your friends, and also don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Thanks.